Hi again, everyone. Gary Digital Williams here on the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network. And the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network, as always, can be heard on Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, as well as Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're on Podcast Addict, and we're on also TuneIn. And you can hear it on YouTube, my Gary Digital Williams YouTube page. On my Twitter page is Digital25. And you can also hear it on Facebook on the Boxing on Beltway Podcast page there. Main places to hear the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network. Pretty loaded this week, not only with updates and some big events that have taken place and some that are going to take place in the next couple weeks in September. And also, we're going to look back at one of the great television Beltway bouts of all time. Now, this bout did not happen in the Beltway, but there's a pretty interesting story around this bout. And, of course, the bout itself was phenomenal. No question about that. And one network, the network that carried that particular one, called one of the best bouts in the history of their broadcast. We'll talk more about that as well. And of course, this week we have been rocked by a number of celebrated passings, none in boxing, but just people that have affected us all over the country and all over the world in some places. And we're going to talk about that this week on our podcast. We'll give them some tributes. I know two of them we'll definitely give tributes to. Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network, brought to you as always by Real-Time Pain Relief. From boxers to ballerinas, for shoulder pain and muscle strain, everything between. Boxing Along the Beltway recommends Real-Time Pain Relief, the natural, plant-based, safe, fast, effective ointment. You go to freepainoffer.com, buy $10 worth of Real-Time Pain Relief. You get a free $10 tube of Real-Time Pain Relief, now endorsed by two-time world champion, heavyweight champion, Big George Foreman. So try George Foreman's knockout formula for real-time pain relief. Rub it on, the pain is gone in real time. And by DeborahSpears.com. She has great weight loss tips as usual, great jewelry, and great training methods. All at Deborah, Debra Spears.com. Good successful weekend this past weekend for Beltway boxers. A couple of our bigger guys had good wins. First of all, Baltimore, Maryland-born heavyweight Cassius Chaney. He remained undefeated with the fourth round TKO over veteran Chauncey Welliver. That was on Friday, August 28th at the Osceola Heritage Park in Kissimmee, Florida. Now, as we talked about last week when we talked about this bout, Chaney had a very large weight disadvantage to go up against. Welliver came in, weighed in at 378 pounds, and Chaney weighed in at 263.2 pounds. And again, heavyweight, it really doesn't matter. I understand that, but that's almost 400 pounds. I've never seen a 400-pound heavyweight boxer before, and that was about as close as I've come with it as far as Chauncey Welliver is concerned. And Chaney didn't really matter because he battered Welliver all over the ring, and Welliver became, as I like to say, a punching bag with feet. And midway through the fourth round, now Welliver never went down during the bout, but he was being battered so badly that referee Frank Gentile mercifully stopped the contest at 2:01 of the fourth round. So Chaney, who now lives in New London, Connecticut, and is also training in Florida these days, he raised his record to 19-0, 13 KOs. He's knocked out his last 8 opponents. And Welliver falls to 57, 13, and 5 with 23 knockouts. So Chaney on his winning ways, and hopefully he'll hit a ranking very soon in the heavyweight division, and we'll see what kind of damage he does going forward. So congratulations to Cassius Chaney out of Baltimore, Maryland, now fighting out of New London, Connecticut. Meanwhile, early knockout win for Larry Hitman Pryor, the cruiserweight out of Frederick, Maryland. Needed just 35 seconds to score a technical knockout over Francisco Aridi Neto of Woburn, Massachusetts, by way of Brazil. That was on Saturday, August 29th at the Sports Zone in Derry, New Hampshire. Now, according to reports, Pryor threw a nice left hook to drop Neto. Neto beat referee Leo Gerstel's 10 count, but he was on wobbly legs and he couldn't continue. So the victory breaks a 2-bout losing streak for Pryor. He is now 12-22 with 6 KOs, and Neto falls to 1-9 with 1 KO. So congratulations as well to the hitman, Larry Pryor. So those are the 2 big wins we had over the weekend on the Beltway. Now, we have a couple of Beltway boxers in the next few weeks. They got some big bouts coming up. No question about that. First one will be Cobia Soldier Breedy, the undefeated Hyattsville, Maryland featherweight. Now, DC Mike TV, my good buddy Mike Jolly, he's reporting that Cobia Soldier Breedy will be a late replacement for a WBC featherweight title elimination bout against Tuxcot King Tud Nyambayar of Los Angeles, California, by way of Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. That bout will take place on Saturday, September 19th. It'll be a 10-round bout, I believe, either 10 or 12. I'm not exactly sure. 10 or 12-round bout, and that'll be at the Mohegan Sun Casino, Uncasville, Connecticut, and the bout will be shown on Showtime. Now, Breedy, who is not ranked in the WBC, he replaces the 4th-ranked challenger in the WBC featherweight title, Eduardo Ramirez. Now, no reason why Ramirez could not continue, but they took him off the bout, and Breedy is in there. Breedy is coming off, he's 15-0, 5 KOs. He's coming off a very impressive 6-round TKO over Titus Williams. That was on December 7th in Brooklyn, New York. And I believe that bout was televised, and he did look good in that bout. Now, Nyambayar is 11-1, 9 KOs. His only pro loss came when he challenged the WBC featherweight champion, now one of the longest reigning champions in the boxing world. That's our own Gary Russell Jr. out of Capitol Heights, Maryland. He challenged Nyambayar is 11-1, 9 KOs, and he lost a 12-round unanimous decision to Gary Russell Jr. for the WBC title. That was on February 8th of this year in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Now, what that means is, should Breedy defeat Nyambayar, then it'll be Breedy who will get the title, possible title shot for Russell's WBC title. And of course, Russell over the last few weeks has been talking about possibly moving up all the way up to welterweight. He's talking about he's been making some claims about going after Terrence Crawford. So we'll see what happens there. No question about that. But Breedy, big bout for him. Big bout for him. He showed in his last bout that he does have a little bit of power now, and that's helping him considerably. And who knows? He could really pull off what I think a lot of people would think would be an upset against Nyambayar. Nyambayar is a very solid boxer, no question about it. And he gave Gary Russell a pretty good run, but Russell's overall speed and overall ability just did the damage. Now, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I believe Breedy has sparred with Russell, and that could be very interesting all the way around. That whole scenario could be very, very interesting. That'll be Saturday, September 19th, and that'll be at Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. Cobia the Soldier Breedy, and he'll take on Tuxcot Nyambayar of Los Angeles, California, by way of Mongolia. That'll be on Showtime. Meanwhile, an bout that'll be shown on FS1 on Wednesday night, September 23rd. It'll be emanating from the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, California. The sexy Albanian, Yank Pllana of Hagerstown, Maryland. He'll be an important 8-round bout. He'll battle undefeated Maidel Sando of Nashville, Tennessee, by way of Las Tunas, Cuba. And it'll be a 8-round bout on FS1. Now, Pllana's 8-1-1, 4 KOs. He's trained by 3-time world champion Simon Brown, and he has been on a roll lately, going 3-0-1 with 2 knockouts in his last 4 bouts. That streak includes a big 10-round unanimous decision victory over Kevin Newman II. That was on February 28th in Las Vegas, Nevada. That bout was televised by Showtime. Good bout. Very good bout. And Pllana looked very good in that bout. The close unanimous decision, but I think he won all 3 scores at 96-94. Sando is 9-0, 7 KOs, but he has not fought since March of 2019. Scored a second-round KO over Demetrius Walker in Louisville, Kentucky. Pllana is only the 3rd boxer with an over 500 record that Sando has faced. Meanwhile, Pllana has only faced 3 boxers with records under 500. So this could be very interesting. And we don't know how good Sando really is because his record, and look at his quality of opposition, that has been shown that he is that good, even though he's 9-0, 7 KOs. So if Pllana can get off to a good start in that bout, he could win that bout and really move on to bigger and better things. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. That'll be on Wednesday, September 23rd. Wednesday, September 23rd at the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, California. Bout will be shown in FS1. I believe it's the co-feature. It'll take on, you have Yank Pllana out of Hagerstown, Maryland, by way of Kosovo. He'll take on Maidel Sando of Nashville, Tennessee, by way of Cuba. And that'll be on Wednesday, September 23rd from the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, California. Then a couple of Beltway boxers will be on a card at the Hilton Garden Inn in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Middleweight Ian Dancer Coakley out of Fort Washington, Maryland. He's 2-0, and he is going to be in a 4-round bout against a boxer to be determined. Coakley's gone off to a really good start, winning both his bouts by unanimous decision. Meanwhile, the educated boxer out of Dundalk, Maryland, Dorian Bostic, he is actually a native of Cheraw, South Carolina, and so he's kind of home there. And he's been fighting in South Carolina his last couple bouts. In fact, he has another bout scheduled for November in the very same location here, the Hilton Garden Inn in Rock Hill. His last bout was there as well. He's 2-0, both his wins by first-round knockout. He's looking for an opponent on this card as well, scheduled for 4 rounds. So Ian Dancer Coakley and the educated boxer Dorian Bostic, they will be on the card on Saturday, September 26th, at the Hilton Garden Inn in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So look forward to best wishes to all Beltway boxers. Now, historical perspective this week is going to be kind of interesting. And I got to start with a story that takes place in a little more recent time before I go back to the bout itself. Back in February of 2014, I was at a weigh-in for a card that my good friend Cassandra White was putting together for her Baby Girl Productions. And I was there to kind of MC the weigh-in. Discombobulating Jones, I believe he did the card. I'm not sure. I may have done the card now I think about it. But either way, I was there for the weigh-in. I took the liberty to go ahead and had the permission to kind of MC the weigh-in. What I mean by that is that I was able to call the boxers to the platform, to the scale, and have them face off and so forth. Now, as I was looking around the room, seeing all the great people that were there, 2 people in particular caught my eye. And once I saw it, I couldn't let this moment go by. In the room, both now distinguished trainers at this time, were 2 guys who once fought each other in one of the greatest television bouts that Beltway Boxing has ever seen. The bout didn't take place here in D.C., in the Beltway area. It took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I saw Victor Davis and I saw Vincent, the ambassador Petway. Davis was out of D.C., of course. Petway was out of Baltimore. I saw them together. So I made a big production out of it, and I had them come together. I had them face off like they did back in the day, and I just had to honor that moment. It was no anniversary or anything, but I just happened to see these guys there. And I said, I have to do this. This bout was an unbelievable contest. It took place on April 3rd, 1990, and the place was the Blue Horizon in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, USA Network, and during their Tuesday night fights telecast, televised the bout. Al Albert, Sean O'Grady did the commentary. Now, this bout wasn't even really supposed to take place that night. George Foreman, who was in the midst of his comeback before he became the 2-time the oldest man to win the heavyweight championship for the second. He won it for the second time. He was supposed to be the main event on this card, but that bout fell through. So Davis and Petway had less than a week to prepare for this contest, but they were very familiar with each other because they'd faced each other 4 times during the amateurs, and both guys won 2 bouts each. And both these guys were trained by legendary trainers. Davis by his father, Adrian Davis, and Petway by the legendary Mac Lewis. Now, as an aside, this card itself turned out to be a Beltway Boxing showcase in and of itself. Future world champion Shambe Mitchell was on the card. Shambe Mitchell, by the way, just celebrated a birthday. And this is the night he unveiled his famous suspenders to the boxing world. This is his first bout after former world champion Bazooka Limon intentionally pulled down his trunks during a bout in Atlantic City the previous month. And also, Keith Holmes was fighting in his 4th pro bout. So 2 former, future, world champions, Shambe Mitchell and Keith Holmes were on the card. And also Baltimore boxers, and I think, I know one of them came out of the Mac Lewis gym, Scott Jones and Tracy Muse were on this card as well from Baltimore. Now, I'm going to take the description of truly one of the legendary writers in boxing history. He's a Hall of Famer in his own right. Wrote primarily out of Philadelphia for Philadelphia Daily News. Bernard Fernandez, as I talk about this, a lot of what I'm going to say is based on what he said in this description. Now, the first round, as Fernandez said, was a tip-off. What was the follow? Beltway was ranked number 7 by the IBF at that time. He was 30-3, 25 knockouts at that time. He came out swinging and was met in the center of the ring by equally determined Davis, and the round was basically an insane exchange of the punches, which ended in the two men trying to wrestle one another to the canvas. Now, Fernandez said as early as the fourth round, Davis, who came in the ring with a record of 19-8-1, 10 KOs, he appeared spent. But every time Beltway tried to move in for the kill, Davis tapped some source of inner rejuvenation and answered with a flurry of his own. Seventh round had to be seen to be believed, Fernandez said, as Davis and Beltway seized and relinquished the upper hand in rapid-fire intervals. He continued to punch away after the bell ended the round sounded, and referee Frank Cappuccino stepped in to separate him. He was tagged with a glancing shot from Davis that opened a cut on his nose. The card's other referee, Joe O'Neill, replaced him in the 8th round, but Cappuccino returned for the 9th. That's how wild this bout was, no question about it. Now, the 9th round turned out to be the last round. During the course of another toe-to-toe burst, a right from Davis opened a deep, ugly gash over Beltway's left eye that proved to be more serious than the assorted nicks, bumps, and bruises that the two men inflicted upon one another, says Bernard Fernandez. And Beltway and his manager-trainer, Matt Lewis, were outraged when Steinberg advised Cappuccino to stop the fight. But the doctor insisted he had made the right call. The doctor's name, I don't think I have his name here, but the doctor was advised Cappuccino to stop the fight. And the doctor told Fernandez that tissue was hanging out. The cut looked like it was cut all the way to the bone. Now, were it not for the stoppage, the outcome might well have hinged on the 10th round. It never took place. Now, this bout apparently was on a 5-point must system, looked like, as Judge Manny Altman had Beltway comfortably ahead 43-39, but Marcia Taylor and Paul Harris favored Davis by 42-41 and 41-39, respectively. The Daily News, the paper that Fernandez wrote for at the time, had Beltway up 42-41. And so Beltway said, I think I should have been given the benefit of the doubt, but the doctor did what he did, and I guess I have to accept it. Beltway said, I'll say this, though. I never expected Victor Davis to put up a fight like that. Amazing. Just amazing. The motor of the card, Frank Gelb added $500 to each man's $5,000 purse for their great efforts. USA Network boxing analyst, former world champion Sean O'Grady called it a great, great fight. And when USA Network entered the Tuesday Night Fight Series in 1998, the Davis-Beltway bout was among its top 10 bouts in the history of the series. So that was just an amazing, amazing, amazing card. Now, after the card, ironically, both men would lose their very next contest after facing each other. Davis lost a 10-round unanimous decision to Darrell Lattimore on June 15, 1990 at Coolidge High School in D.C., while Beltway was stopped in the 6th round by Stephen Johnson at the old Painters Mill Theater in Owings Mills, Maryland on November 13, 1990. But from there, the careers of both men took very divergent paths. Beltway would go undefeated his next 6 contests over a 3-year period, leading him to 2 world title shots for the IBF Junior Middleweight Championship against Gianfranco Rossi. First bout on March 4th, 1994 at the MGM Grand Garden Hotel in Las Vegas. And in a 6-round technical draw when the two men butted heads in what had been a very foul-played contest. Rossi suffered a nasty cut over his left eye and couldn't continue. Since the bout had not gone the full 6 rounds, the bout was declared a technical draw. Both men returned to the MGM Grand on September 17, 1994 for a rematch. This time, Beltway would knock out Rossi with a left hook in the 4th round to win the IBF title and become the first world champion from Baltimore in more than 80 years. I got to look at that highlight. Like my buddy Ed Griffin, who has a DMV fight clip every Friday on Facebook. And he showed that this past weekend. And he was a beautiful shot. And Rossi just could not get up. Now for Davis, things would get a little rougher as he won most of his bouts during that same 4-year period. Outside issues would stunt a promising career. Davis helped launch the historic ballroom boxing promotion on Michael 8th Avenue in Glen Burnie, Maryland. Be involved in the first main event of the history of the series Davis would lose by a second round TKO to Richmond, Virginia's Napoleon Pitt on September 2nd, 1995. But both men are Beltway boxing legends. In fact, a good buddy of mine, Han Kim, will lay a claim that he believes, no matter what everybody else has done in Beltway boxing history, Victor Davis was the best boxer that ever boxed in the area. He said that to me for many years. And both these guys were outstanding boxers. They were tremendous. And I love both. I love both of them. They're really good people too. Both of them master trainers, and it's good to see them both doing well. Of course, we continue to give our condolences to Victor and his family for the recent death of Miss Brenda Davis. But they learn from their masters. They learn from Adrian Davis and Mac Lewis. They learn from the people they stood on their shoulders and have done it very, very well. So, again, that took place on April 3rd of 1990, and the tribute to it that I conducted took place in February 2014. And it was a moment I saw it and I said, I just can't let this pass by. I really can't. So I just had to do that. So it was really great to see him. And again, we've got to give people their tributes while they're still here, which leads to the tributes I have to give today. Now, we just heard word this past couple of days ago, actually yesterday, as we reported on Wednesday, that truly one of the great baseball pitchers of all time passed away, leading the Miracle Mets in 1969 to their first World Championship after they'd been a laughingstock in Major League Baseball prior to. One of the greatest pitchers I ever saw in Major League Baseball. And this is from someone who lived primarily in American League territory most of his life. The Washington Senators and the Baltimore Orioles were both in the American League. It wasn't until the Nationals that we started seeing National League ball on a regular basis. So I didn't get to see a lot of Terrific Tom Seaver, but he was a tremendous. I saw him on TV, watching the Saturday afternoon game of the week, and sometimes on Monday Night Baseball and so forth. But he was tremendous. He was a tremendous player, one of the greatest pitchers. 311 wins, 3 Cy Youngs. Played with the Mets, the Reds, and the Chicago White Sox. And he was Tom Terrific for a reason. He was great and kind of really a humble guy too, which is interesting to see because as great as he was, he never let that bug him. And I won't say he hosted the baseball, but I know he hosted Greatest Sports Legends. That's what it was. He hosted one of the people who hosted Greatest Sports Legends, and he being a legend himself. It's so interesting to see him talk to other sports legends. I'll never forget he did one with the only wrestler that appeared on the show, Bruno Sammartino. And Sammartino kind of put him in some holds and all. It was really fun to see. He did a good job with that, no question about that. So that's sad news there. Great pitcher, Tom Seaver. And of course, everybody around the world is still reeling over the sudden passing of Chadwick Boseman. By the way, Seaver passed away at the age of 75. He had dementia. Louis dementia, they called it. And also he had COVID, from what I hear. One report said he did have COVID. And that was tough there. But Chadwick Boseman passing at the age of 43. He was 43 years old. Of colon cancer. And a cancer that he had really for 4 years and never let anyone know. Except his family and close friends. None of his co-stars in any of his movies knew. And he did such great work during that time period, from 42 to Marshall to the Avengers, and of course is the one he'll always be remembered for, Black Panther. And of course, I had a kinship with him because we're both Howard University graduates. So, it was that made it sadder for me. I, like everyone else, I love Black Panther, and also saw him in Get On Up with the story he did on the movie he did about James Brown. He was excellent in that as well. And, just to know what see what he struggled with and not know about it really was phenomenal. And he did just outstanding work. And so, and again, being, having a kinship with him being a Howard University graduate, knowing how important that is, and how so many people have benefited from being at Howard University, like myself. And you see a lot of Howard University grads on TV now, for example, of course, Gus Johnson, the great sportscaster, Frederica Whitfield on CNN, Michelle Miller on CBS. Just got word that another Howard grad, Megan Fitzgerald, who used to work up until recently, worked at the Washington affiliate of NBC, will now move to NBC News and be on a national based out of Chicago, on national circuit based out of Chicago. So again, Howard University brilliance all over the place. So many I have named. I mean, going back to the actors like Felicia Rashad, who was very instrumental in Chadwick Boseman's career. Her sister Debbie Allen, Roxy Roker, who played Helen Willis on The Jeffersons, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee. So many people. Too numerous to name right now. Just in the entertainment field. I mean, Anthony Anderson, who's on Blackish. You know, he's a Howard grad. So, I mean, just so many. And Chadwick Boseman certainly lived up to that reputation and did Howard University proud. And of course, he came back and spoke at his alma mater, graduation 2018. Beautiful speech. If you ever get a chance to look at it. Wonderful speech. So that was really shocking. And then for me personally, the loss that really, really hurt was the loss of one of the greatest basketball coaches, college basketball coaches in history. The first African-American to lead a team to the national championship. And when I look back on that and I realized that Georgetown University was literally 3 points from winning 3 national championships in 4 years. It's amazing. But John Thompson Jr. will mean so much more to me than that. And he was tremendous. I have a number of personal recollections of John Thompson, because I actually met him in 1972. He had just gotten the job at Georgetown University. He came over from a very big program in D.C. at that time, St. Anthony's High School in Washington, D.C. St. Anthony's no longer exists. But when it was here, it was a beautiful program. And the legend is that John Thompson was not really looking at the Georgetown program. Georgetown basketball, no one knew Georgetown had basketball. This town, the Washington, D.C. area at that time, was strictly Maryland. There's Lefty Driesell, who was the head coach there, and they had a great team with John Lucas and Mo Howard and Tom McMillan, who later became a senator and played with the Washington Bullets for many years in Atlanta Hawks. Jim O'Brien, you know, they had an outstanding team. Len Elmore. And so Maryland was the big college program here in the Washington, D.C. area. So 1972, Thompson gets the job at Georgetown. But the word was, and again, this is I don't know if this is a true legend or not, but I've always heard the story that Thompson was actually looking at the job at Howard University at that time. And he was beaten out of that job by another great high school coach here in the area, coached at Easton Senior High School at the time, and actually was the Metro All-Star coach for, I know, the first Capital Classic, maybe the second one as well, but definitely the first Capital Classic. That was the one where Moses Malone played in the Capital Classic that year. And his name was A.B. Williamson. So A.B. Williamson had beaten out John Thompson for the Howard job. So John Thompson took the Georgetown job almost as a consolation. And I remember when he first started, first of all, for those who don't know, John Thompson on his desk had a flat basketball. And what the flat basketball represented was, if basketball does not work out for you, in other words, you don't get to the pros or you don't play overseas, make sure you have something to fall back on. Well, my father, Russell Williams, who was a gym teacher for many years at Lincoln Middle School, Lincoln Junior High School, as well as Bell Vocational High School, actually gave John Thompson that ball because John Thompson knew my grandmother, my mother's mother, Blanche Bowman. They worked at 4-H together. 4-H, 4-H corporation there. And so that's how my dad was able to give John Thompson the basketball. Now, another person I know who actually not only worked with my dad at Lincoln Julian High School, she actually worked with me as a teacher at Spingarn High School. So it's really weird, but she was saying that Thompson used to come up all the time to Lincoln to talk to the athletes there. So that was very interesting there. So I remember my dad and I got tickets to see Georgetown play Fordham. This was over at before they ever considered thinking about playing at what was in the Capitol Center. But anyway, Georgetown lost to Fordham by 20 points. Fordham, who haven't done anything since, but Fordham University in New York, they beat Georgetown at home by 20. And I know people were upset with Thompson. They wanted him to go, and that's the most polite I can say it on the air. There was a lot of let's just say racist statements said about Thompson at the time. But Frank Rienzo, who was the athletic director, stuck with him, and finally he started recruiting some quality people. He started out with a DC connection out of Dunbar High School, John Bebe Duran and Craig Big Sky Sheldon. Those are his first really two big recruits, along with a guy out of Carroll High School by the name of Al Dutch. And from there, it just kept on rolling. And finally, he was able to, in 1981 or so, he would get his prize, which was now the man who is now the current coach at Georgetown University, legendary Patrick Ewing. And from there, it just took care of business. And that led to, in large part, to the creation of, if not the greatest college basketball conference at one time, certainly just legendary. When you think about college basketball, a lot of people think first, especially in this part of the country, of the Big East. I mean, Atlantic Coast Conference led for many years, but when Georgetown got together with Syracuse, St. John's, Villanova, Pittsburgh, eventually, who else? Providence College. I mean, the Big East was awesome. And Big East basketball coupled with the basketball was going on in the Washington area at that time, you couldn't beat it. At that time, everybody in Washington, all college teams in Washington, the Washington area, had a great, great team. Howard was coming off their great seasons with a team they had called the Dunk Patrol, with A.B. Williamson at the helm. Maryland had a great team, especially with Len Bias at Maryland. George Washington had a great team. American had a really solid team. George Mason had a solid team. I mean, you had it all over the place in the Beltway, and of course, Georgetown was leading the way. And also, can't forget UDC, the University of District of Columbia. They were a Division II program, but in 1982, they had won the Division II National Championship, and the next year they went back to the finals. They had a great player by the name of Earl Jones. They had Clifton Cottom and also John Jones. So you couldn't beat DC basketball. And not only that, add to that, in 1983, the only year that Georgetown was not in the final, 1983, North Carolina State was in the finals against Houston. And their three best players were all players from the Washington, D.C. area. Derek Wittenberg and Sidney Lowe out of DeMatha High School in Hyattsville, Maryland. And Thurl Bailey out of Bladensburg, Maryland, and Bladensburg High School in Bladensburg, Maryland. So you couldn't beat us. No question about it. You couldn't beat us. And think about what John Thompson did, with those three teams. I mean, 1982, they lost that tough pass that Fred Brown threw that was that was intercepted by James Worthy. Didn't see. He looked out of peripheral vision and saw and thought what he thought was a teammate, but trying to be James Worthy. And then Brown's redemption when they won the championship in '84 against Houston. And then, of course, the game where Villanova had to play a perfect game to beat Georgetown. They did that and still only beat Georgetown by 2 points that year. Tremendous. So, and, just the way John Thompson stood up for his players, stood up for the sport in many ways, and when he saw that there was something that didn't seem right, he made it known that he felt it didn't seem right. Proposition 48, for example, that was the rule in NCAA that a player had to have a 2.0 grade point average to be recruited, had to have 720 on the SATs, or had I think it was 15 out of 36 in the ACTs. And he thought the test was culturally biased and the whole thing was racist. So one night at a game at the then Capitol Center against Boston College, if memory serves me correct, he walked off the court, and he was steadfast in his ways and adamant in his principles, and I loved him for it, no question about it. I had a chance to I won't say get to know John Thompson. I never really knew him, but to kind of be around his presence. He had a large presence, 6'10", had a large presence. In 1982, my grandmother passed away, Blanche Bowman, and during the Big East tournament, John Thompson came from New York, because the tournament was always at Madison Square Garden, came from New York back to D.C., and he came to my grandmother's funeral. And I remember seeing him in the back of the church, and I was amazed that he was there. Again, he was in the Big East tournament, man. It was just, what was he doing here? But he thought that much of my grandmother to come to her funeral, and I'll never forget that. That was amazing. So that was great to see. In 1986, I was attending the first of my 3 sportscasters camps, and I know my buddy Roy Engelbrecht, who led those camps, had a talk about that and asked for people to give their recollection about it. I have great recollections of those 3 camps I went to. The first one was in Princeton, New Jersey. It was during the Nike All-American ABCD basketball camp. This camp was with a lot of high schoolers who the best high school players in the country would come there every year. And they'd have scrimmages throughout the day. And one of our jobs for the camp was to actually do quote unquote broadcasts, and we'd do them on audio tape of those games. And because just about every college coach was there at the time, we had an opportunity to try to interview all of them. And I know Jim Valvano was there. We got to hang out with Jim Valvano and just shoot the breeze with him. That was so cool. Unbelievable. And we got to interview Larry Brown, and some of the other coaches would give their time and help us out. And the one who didn't do it was John Thompson. And he was saying he was teaching us a lesson, how to react when you don't get the interview that you want. He walked away. Yeah, I was like, well, that sounds like him, so that was just him. But, he didn't have to do it, and he didn't. So how simple as that. So that was it. Now, in later years, John Thompson, once he retired from coaching, he became a sports talk host, and a very good sports talk host on one of the local sports talk stations here in Washington, D.C., WTEM. He worked with Doc Walker and Brian Mitchell and Scott Jackson, and did a great job. He really did. Doc Walker always used to talk about his Rolodex that Thompson had, and where he would literally have some of the biggest names in all of sports. And they would come and talk to John Thompson on his show. I mean, Jim Brown, John Chaney, the great coach at Temple. I mean, you name it, he had it. And he had their names, and he had their trust. And that was beautiful there. And what a lot of people didn't remember was that John Thompson was a heck of an analyst. He would be on the Westwood One radio broadcast of the NCAA tournament and do an outstanding job. He really did. I mean, he really, if he wanted to pursue that, he would have been out. I mean, even further, like be on CBS, whatever. He'd been fantastic. He would have been fantastic. He was really good at what he did there with that. So he was just a great man. He was a really great man. His principles were wonderful. I remember going up to Georgetown with a good friend of mine, Chris Peters, my high school buddy, and we would go to the Yates Athletic Center. And that was a center that was built primarily on the money that Georgetown University and John Thompson would raise for that university. The Georgetown name became a national brand because it was all over the place. Because a lot of people believe it or not, a lot of people thought Georgetown was an HBCU. It was a black college. Because almost the entire team was black most of the time. I mean, there was some Caucasians who played on teams and did a good job. Guys like Jeff Bullis and David Blue played at Prospect Hall, and Jeff Bullis played at Georgetown Prep, I believe. I gotta remember that. I don't think he played at Bullis, but his last name was Bullis. But anyway, there weren't that many though, and a lot of people were frowned on that too. That was not well received all the time. Let's put it that way. But it was a remarkable time, and there's a quote in John Thompson Center now. It's a newer building than the Yates Center is, and there's a quote there that says, in part, "When I die, if I can't go to heaven, bring me back to Georgetown." That was said by John Thompson Jr. Of course, he leaves a legacy in his sons, John Thompson III, or JT3 as we like to call him, and Ronnie Thompson, who's doing an outstanding job as a color commentator and an analyst on NBC Sports Washington. But the one thing about John Thompson, in many ways, he changed college basketball forever. And just shows you how tough this year has been all over the place. Personally, with my father-in-law passing away of COVID just a week before his 100th birthday. And then there's so many of the legendary people we have lost. I mean, who would have thought we lose two basketball coaching legends in the same year? Back in January, we lost Morgan Wooten, legendary coach of DeMatha. And now this past week, we lose John Thompson. Amazing. And this has just been 2020. Can't wait for it to get out of here real quickly. No question about that. But that's true. Again, we lost three very, very beautiful people in Tom Seaver, Chadwick Boseman, and John Thompson Jr. And that will do it for another edition of Beltway Boxing, the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network. Remember, the Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network, brought there by Real-Time Pain Relief. You go to freepainoffer.com, buy $10 worth of real-time pain relief. You get a free $10 tube of real-time pain relief, now endorsed by Big George Foreman. So try George Foreman's knockout formula, real-time pain relief. Rub it on. The pain is gone in real time. And by DeborahSpears.com. She has great weight loss tips, great jewelry, and great training methods at Deborah, Debra Spears.com. Thank you so much for joining me in these recollections and also these tributes. I really do appreciate you listening to these tributes. That'll do it. My name is Gary Digital Williams. Thank you as always for joining us. And always remember to keep supporting the best boxing in the world. The boxing on the Beltway. Thanks for listening. Take care.